Hello, I'm Samantha Anderson, Director of Communications for Newton Public Schools, and I'm here with Superintendent Mr. Van Rankin, and we're just going to go over some of the gating criteria that was set up on Monday night's board meeting. There's a lot to go over, and we know there's a lot of questions, so we just wanted to make this video to better explain what's going on and clear out any confusion. So, Mr. Van Rankin, will you let us know what was used to set up the gating criteria?
In terms of what was used?
Yeah,
Okay.
what will they look at?
Yeah, there were 5 criteria that the Kansas State Department of Education, along with the Kansas Department of Health and Environment, put out. It's been a couple of weeks ago now, for us to consider in terms of what we could use as guidance for establishing what mode of operation we are going to be in. Okay, and those criteria are student absenteeism, and you would we consider what they call an average daily attendance, which is a value that was, the percentage would have been calculated based upon last year's attendance rate. And then they gave us some values for different colors that they assigned in that guidance for operation: green, yellow, orange, or red. So what you would essentially do is look at that ADA value from that past year, and you would compare it to, okay, what is my average daily attendance now at the point that we're pulling that information for that week that we would be planning the mode of operation for. And if we're 3% or above, equal to 3% or above that baseline ADA, we'd be in green. If we're 3.0 to 5.9%, we would be in yellow. 6.0 to 9.9, we would be in orange. And then red would be anything greater than 10%. And that's just one of those gating criteria. And that was one in talking with the Harvey County Health Department, as we had a few of our committee meetings. They felt there were 3 criteria that we should use: that ADA, that value compared to our attendance, and then the 2-week % positive case rate, which we would obtain from their site. Okay. And once again, when you look at that 2-week positive % case rate, if it's less than or equal to 5%, we'd be green. If it's between 5.1 and 9.9, we'd be in yellow. Orange is 10 to 14.9%, and anything greater than 15%, we would be in red. Now, testing is a big issue in terms of the actual testing programs and access that we have to testing. One of the things that was made clear when this guidance was released and Dr. Watson, the Kansas State Department of Education Commissioner, went through, is that those values are adjusted for that, what we consider to be lack of capacity to test large populations. So that would probably be a lower amount if we were testing everyone, is what I'm trying to say. The third one would be that the third one that they felt was the most important for us to use was that Trandon County incidence rate. And if you watched the board meeting last night, we kind of talked about 3 different sources where we could kind of harvest that trend. One is from the Harvey County Health Department, and they're going to put an actual value on that soon. But right now we have to go in there and actually manually calculate that. We can also just actually do the math ourselves and set that up into there's a Desmos website that gives you, actually, if you guys do the math, folks, that remember that old slope of a line, that y is equal to mx plus b, and that slope tells you, kind of what your rise over your run is to determine, what your trend is. So that's another thing that some folks are keeping locally for us here, actually within our system. And the last one is going to the Kansas Department of Health and Environment. They have a trend chart as well that we can actually get specific to our county. The bad thing about using that one is that it's about a week behind in terms of the data. So the most current data that we have that's accessible is through the Harvey County Health Department site. The 2 data points that in our conversations with the Harvey County Health Department, they said that probably weren't as valuable to us, but what could be used when determining if there's an issue in using those 3 criteria, we could go to that 4th or 5th value, is the 2-week cumulative county incidence rate, which is essentially taking the number of 2 cases within that 2-week period and then doing your old proportionality stuff and determining how that would be per 100,000. So the last time I had calculated that yesterday was about 187.5. When you look at that, that 2-week cumulative incidence rate, you know, if it's 187.5, that would put us in the red, because Samantha here is going to put out that gating criteria soon. And if you want to kind of go through that with me, it might be a little easier to look at that chart. But there's 0 to 50 new cases, we're in green. 51 to 100, we would be in yellow. 101 to 150, we're orange. And then over 151 or 151 or over, we're in red. So when we calculated that value per 100,000, that put us in that red category, okay? Now, I'm going to kind of back up a little bit, because one of the points that we spent quite a bit of time talking about yesterday was that Trandon County incidence rate. And some of the questions that we have been getting are, you know, when you look at green, it's decreasing in terms of that trend. But then you look at yellow and orange and it says stable, right? Okay. And that's 2 colors representing one value. So that one value kind of has more of a weight if you just look at it this way than the other 2 categories, the absenteeism and the percent positive test rate. And so, you know, we can do some more math with the probabilities there. And we talked a little bit about that last night. And I showed them a chart that was put together that kind of gives them those values. So that's one thing that when we have those conversations, when the board has those conversations based upon that data that we provide, I'm sure that trend will be something that will be discussed quite a bit if there is an issue with what decision we should make. Just kind of wanted to explain that a little bit, because I know that's a thing that folks are kind of confused about, and that's an easy thing to get confused about. The last criteria that we're also not using, because may not be as important right now, it could become important later, is the local referring hospital capacity. There's 2 sources we can find that information. One is on the dashboard at the Harvey County Health Department site. The other one, you can go to the KDHE site. You could also then search in terms of hospital capacity from a regional perspective. We're in that South Central region, which gives us that multi-county area, which would also then include, you know, the Wichita hospitals that could serve as a regional hospital too. So, and we were in pretty good shape as it relates to that. So those 5 criteria with the 3, the ADA, the 2% positive or percent positive test rate, and then the Trandon County, those will be the ones that'll be looked at to determine what mode of operation we'll be in. If we don't think that that is good enough or enough data to make that decision, if the board doesn't, then they'll look at those 2 additional criteria to be able to provide some more, just some more information. And, you know, the data needs to inform our decision, and we need to do that with fidelity as much as possible, because we're trying to be transparent about, we are being transparent about what we're doing here as it relates to that. So I hope that kind of answers your question, Sam. That's a long answer.
I think you answered a couple questions. A lot of parents had questions about activities. How will those work?
The goal of the Board of Education is to ensure that students have the opportunity to participate in activities, honestly, all the way until we get to the red category in terms of gating. Now, there may be some changes, and those changes will be made on that weekly basis, you know, based upon what mode of operation we're in. They were real adamant yesterday evening, for the most part, in their discussions. If you get a chance to look that over, you know, they want those kids to have that opportunity to do so. We're going to follow social distancing. You know, we're going to follow the hygiene practices. The kids, you know, made that commitment when they had addressed the board last night. You know, there may be some things where they're limiting group sizes and stuff like that. You know, so there may be some changes over that, but we want to the extent possible, continue to allow those activities. One of the biggest things to understand as a parent or spectator is that those were some of the restrictions that might come into play for you. We have a set of USD 373 guidelines that I'm sure Sam will be able to post along with some of this information from Brian Becker. As it relates to activities, kids have been involved in following these protocols, and coaches and sponsors all summer long. And so that will be included. But when we're in our green, you know, we may have some limited attendance that applies, but but we're still going to require masks. We're still going to require social distancing. Those kinds of things will take place. But like right now, I think we had stated earlier, we'll be in yellow until the 11th of September. But what that would require is some limited spectator access. So going to limit to 2 per participant or 25% capacity. Now, how does that mean? How does that work? Mr. Becker is working on that to ensure that, we can get parents there. But we are going to limit that so that in our facilities, we are going to not, it's not going to be a packed house like it might have been in the past. And so that's an important thing to remember. So if you have a question, you can reach out to Mr. Becker at the Newton High School office. And he could kind of explain some of that to you or read through that guidance that Samantha might put out, although there may not be a lot of stuff in there about spectator stuff. They've also worked within the league about some of that guidance. And one thing you've got to understand is that if a league school that we're going to has stricter criteria, that will be communicated through the athletic office here. And I'm sure Mr. Becker will get that out to parents so they understand we'll follow their rules when we're on their turf, so to speak, at their competitions. But they're trying to be as consistent as possible across the league as it relates to that. When we get to orange, or if we get to that orange level, we're talking virtual streaming options only. Now, for varsity competitions, that may not be as big of an issue, especially with football, and I'm assuming volleyball. I'm not 100% sure there. But the issue will be when you start talking about virtual streaming options. Probably doesn't happen a lot of cross country or golf, and things like that. I'm not even sure about soccer. But that's what would happen in relation to the virtual streaming. So there would be no attendance or no spectators allowed. So it would only be just the students, the coaches, and whatever event staff are needed to run the events. So that's a thing to keep in mind. And once again, if we don't want to get there, wear your mask, social distance, practice good hygiene, all that other stuff. Let's make sure that we halt the spread as much as we possibly can. So that kind of wraps that up. One more thing to talk about in terms of activities. You'll notice where it says in the red column, when you look at that chart, it says remote. Well, how do you do remote football? You don't, okay? But there are some activities like Scholars Bowl and stuff like that they are trying to figure out a way where they could actually have some remote competitions. So if they get that kind of stuff figured out, that could be kind of fun. Could be kind of cool. So I think that covers activities.
A couple questions we have been getting. When you look at these graphics, you'll see that K through 6 is different than 7 through 12. So yellow means something different for pre-K through 6 than 7 through 12. So what goes into that? Why was that decision made?
Well, once again, that was a function of the criteria we received on the one hand. On the other hand, too, when we're looking at this, we need to consider the safety, balancing that as it relates to the virus, and then also balancing that safety as it relates to just normal life, okay? And, one of the things, and I know that everybody doesn't agree with me, and I totally am fine with you not agreeing with me, is that, that custodial care piece for parents in terms of that safety for those students. I really hate seeing a 10-year-old being unsupervised at home alone. And I've heard several times that's not my responsibility or not the school's responsibility. And I understand your perspective, but historically that has been the school's responsibility. And so, that's just going to be a point that we have to disagree on a little bit. And that was one of the things too, our board as a board or as a whole. And I know that there's disagreements there perhaps in some sense, that, we should maybe, really focus on that balance to ensure that we can provide that safety on both of those fronts. That's a hard one because, when you look at what some of that guidance also says is, we want to try to get those groups into sizes 15 or less. And we really worked really hard to do that at that elementary through the 6th grade level, or for pre-K through the 6th grade level. It's really hard on that K through 6 front to do that and have those groups 15 or less in front of a certified teacher all day, okay? And we worked really hard, and it's just not logistically possible. So that was one of the points of conversation last night that we spent quite a bit of time on. And the board, through consensus, made the decision to stick with that as full on-site. Now we're going to work, the social distancing will be in place. We're going to also look at some other ways to maybe get creative, especially at the 5th, 6th building. I think that's where a lot of the questions are, or a lot of the problems are, or consternation on the part of parents, to see what kinds of things that we can do to reduce some of those class sizes, if at all possible. It's a tough situation. It's a lose-lose in a lot of ways. We are focusing on the safety of our kids, and we have to also focus on the safety of our staff. So, that's really the reason why. And also, when you look at the data, when it talks about the susceptibility of students in terms of contracting the virus, what we've been told up to this point, they are less susceptible. Okay. The concern too, from me, goes to our staff are susceptible. So trying to make sure that we keep those groups of students with the same with the teacher is real important. So this was a hard one. It was a really tough discussion, and like I said, we have to make a decision, and we have to move forward, and we have to determine if that was the best decision and make adjustments based upon new information that we get. So we may have to revisit. Well, we will have to revisit parts of this at different times, and that's one thing I want everyone to understand. This isn't something set in stone that lasts forever, but we just have to have a starting point and try to go. So once again, long-winded answer. I'm good at those, Sam.
And then who all worked on putting together these criteria? Who all was in that group?
Well, in the committees themselves, we had two different, we had a group of administrators, and I'm going to pull up the names here so I don't leave anybody off. We had 3 board members. The 3 board members were Jennifer Buddy, Mallory Morton, and Angela Becker. We had Brian Becker involved, AD at the district, Caleb Smith, our high school principal, Dina Waltrip, our 5-6 principal. Harvey County Health Department was involved in the very first meeting that we had, and they also spent time with me reviewing the plan and approving what we had adopted, or what we were going to present. Jane Nichols, our HR person, Karen Lehman, our head nurse, Sarah Livesay, our pre-K administrator. So those were the folks that were actually on the committee. Okay. I also got some input from a couple of local doctors, and tried to at least inform some of the things that we were doing. And so it wasn't just a group of 2 people in a room or 1 person in a room making a decision. So, and it was a course of several different meetings, and a lot of email communication back and forth, and using that criteria, from the Kansas State Department of Education and Kansas Department of Health and Environment.
Okay, and some families want to know, when will we know what mode we're in for each week?
Well, the goal is going to be to meet on Monday, sometime during the day on Monday. We'll have a special Board of Education meeting. Last night, the board, through consensus, said they were the ones that wanted to make the decision. So we will call a special board meeting each week, and I will present them the data. They'll have the discussion, and the decision will be made for the following week. So like this past Monday, the decision would have been made for the next Monday. What we actually did last night is they made that decision that will carry us through the Labor Day week. So whatever date that is, I should have looked at the calendar there. Whatever date that is, that decision that we're going to be in will carry us through the 11th of September. So the 3rd and 4th, and then the 8th through the 11th is how long that will last. Now, we are not going to meet on Monday the 7th. With that being Labor Day, we are going to meet. We have a special board meeting for 10 a.m. on the 8th to discuss that criteria, and then we'll release that afternoon.
Is it 10 a.m. or 9 a.m.?
Whatever I had on my calendar, Sam. I think I said 10 a.m. I'll have to look. I have 10 a.m.
Okay, I was wrong. I should have never questioned it.
I have 10.
Um, Last but not least, some families were wanting to know, they didn't have this information available when they were making the decision between remote or flexible. So if now this information has maybe made them want to change their mind, what should those families do?
Well, they need to reach out to their respective building principals because there is that caveat in that selection process where they could do that, and then there's a potential a change will be made. We want to accommodate every parent in their choice. And I know that you folks didn't have this information when you had to make that decision. We didn't have this information when you had to make that decision. We didn't know that there would be, in terms of the guidance, a distinction, for example, with the pre-K through, they actually have 5 at the state level. We have 6 because that meets our facilities needs. We didn't know that those types of pieces of guidance would be given to us. So, reach out if you want to make that change. They're going to do their best to accommodate. I think I'd mentioned at the board meeting last night, and I believe my assistant superintendent, Sheila Wendling, also said, we're going to do the best we can with that. I don't see anybody turning anyone away if they want to make that decision. The thing is, if we have, 80 or 100 people doing that, we've got to go back and revisit our class list. We've got to go back and revisit the number of teachers that we have set aside for remote, but we're going to do whatever we can to best serve families. So.
All right. And if anybody else has any questions, if you're watching this on Facebook, just shoot us either a private message or a comment. And then if anybody has any questions and you got this in your email, shoot us an email at info@usd373.org and we'll get you to the right person to talk to. Mr. Van Raken, do you have anything else to add?
Just want to really be, I'm real thankful that we've got a Board of Education and, teachers that are working so hard to try to provide the opportunities for students. This is really a tough time. And I understand your reservations, your hesitation associated with all of this. Please continue to reach out to us. I know we're not going to always agree on everything. We've just got to make decisions to try to move forward. And this is just a really hard time in public education. So, but it's also a hard time everywhere. So we're not alone in that regard. So continue to communicate with us. Please try to assume good intent because there's never any nefarious thing going on here. There's no conspiracy. We're really working hard to try to provide the best for students and families. And thanks for your patience up to this point.
All right. Well, thank you. And again, if you have any questions, let us know.